Hello and welcome to my Creating Future Experiences sketchbook. In my group, we started by defining what we thought personal health biological meant. To do this, we explored it through this Venn diagram. For this, we pulled together some themes such as resilience, local community, interaction, relationships, balance, and choice and decision. These last two ones are explored in my final outcome. Next, we started by creating step cards. One of the first ones I looked into was community governance, again, which plays into our future world at the end of part one. Although not initially exploring community governance, I was pretty interested in how Indigenous groups work through their ideologies and the idea of reciprocity. Another part of my final outcome I will talk about later. Our first workshop was with and then. From that, we developed these themes and thought about their unintended consequences. From this workshop, we chose two themes: knowledge is currency and timekeeping changes. In the end, we decided to focus on seasonal depression. From the outcome, we had to create a performance. In ours, I played a news broadcast in which I, the news anchor, interacted with scientists, patients, and government officials, played by the rest of my group. In our next workshop, which was focusing on future exhibitions through the lens of a localised healthcare and knowledge becoming a new currency. Doing this in a before and after allowed us to visualise the difference from now and then. At the end of the workshop, we were tasked to create a journey map of someone interacting with reciprocal local healthcare. I got pretty excited to create a way to show how a session at this new hub might work. To do this, I thought about creating an interaction game in which players would be given a character with wants and needs and what they can provide for each other, which allows them to problem solve in real time. Myself and the group then tried to think about what the exhibition world would look like in the workshop. So we were thinking it's a kind of cozy atmosphere with low chairs sitting around in a circle. And this week I was creating the personas and narrative, which I found difficult doing this on my own and wasn't really happy with it in the end. Bianca helped me with the drawings of the people. I created a how to play guide, which would prompt people to read it and then play the game. Once we thought about this, we thought what might direct people to this new hub. I looked at some pictograms from my favourite graphic designers and also a look back to my final project last year, which I used a similar style pictogram. So I created these to show the activities that are located here. Although I liked the outcome, the sign I made wasn't great, and if I was continuing it, I would use the laser cutter to engrave them for a better look. We then had our first expert input session. This was something that I was quite nervous for, and during this I felt like the feedback we got was quite harsh, but in retrospect it was something that we needed so that we didn't drift into a wrong direction. After the weekend we got together as a group to rethink our world. We mind mapped this, then created a timeline which identifies our new world. The whole theme that we have is that we didn't hold value to non-humans and we ran out of harvest, so the scientists have taken over the government and the first thing they do is give non-humans personhood. Creating news headlines to create a timeline of how this event happened. At this point it was very agriculture focused, something I'll explore in my final design. As a group we put forward points to create a manifesto that the government were running on. This created new roles to facilitate green infrastructure, non-human personhood and reciprocity. To figure out new roles, we created jobs and grouped roles into departments. We were then looking at how these roles changed through the Collective Health Centre, which after looking to our exhibition, we thought about a walkthrough where a person would see a decision being made by the council, creating sanctioned green space, then walking through it and being into reality. In our tutorial, decided that a more personal in their shoes exhibition would illustrate it better. From this we came up with a scenario which is based on someone's front room in which data is being collected to show the character, Patrick, is having a negative effect on his ecosystem and then the government intervenes. What the data collection might look like, illustrated here by Galicia's design. The branding for the government and decided on a Soviet style mid-century modern, which is shown in the initial posters and logos created by Bianca. It was meant to look official but also show reciprocity with non-humans. I was then looking at how the data is shown on the plants, in which I designed this device. Then in our exhibition we needed a way to show the government intervening and contacting him, so I created these letters which we're using in our future world. The exhibition we then created is shown here, and it shows the essence of what we were going for. From our feedback, in which we were told to show all known humans in the house, how we might visualize this data, the background story might work as a film format. From this we got together and decided on doing with the frame idea, like the pub exhibition last year. For the layout, we're keeping the same one as before, creating a data hub and showing how the data is harvested by these repos here. This is the start of part 2 individual. For this, I started off by looking at how to form communication/relationships between humans and non-humans through games or music. Here I have a couple of concepts. Firstly, looking at a game installation and parts to create relationships with non-humans. The second one is around ambient noises created by plants. An example of this is mushrooms playing music. Leads into buying certain plants for the like of the sound. Lastly, I looked at a speed dating idea where you'd be matched up with plants based on suitability. At this point, I had my first individual tutorial, which was very helpful as I wasn't thinking about this through a group lens. From here, I was looking at where my moment was how health needs then get visualized, then the human intervention, which was my moment, then leads to a better outcome. I've done quite a lot of research on the data that can be collected from plants and humans and the impact that one has on the other, but I felt quite stuck in research and hadn't thought of design yet. From this, I took a step back from the research and looked at how data might be shown. Then I had a look at my experience, which was the visualization of data to the interaction, which was the person acting upon the data, then the outcome, which was creating a more balanced living standard. Looking at what the person might see the data as, I took some inspiration from our mood board that our group created. Storyboarding here allowed me to visualize a scenario in my head. I was looking at a person, looking at their data, then seeing how his plant needs watered, and then him doing it to make his plant happy and his space happy. Going back to a more public space here, I created it in this, which a tree needs help and the person acting on it is helping it. At this point I was at a crossroads here, was trying to figure out what I was designing. I have to find this happening when I have a lot of ideas. I decided on focusing on creating a hyper behaviour that makes him obsess with his health and the health of his home. Again, going back to music, I was thinking that data might be made into music. For example, it would be an ambient version of your home in which if it was not healthy, it might sound like chaos, but if it was healthy, it would sound like a symphony. I then looked at how plants react with sounds, and I found that low frequency vibrations can improve photosynthesis and that your breath releases carbon dioxide, which is also necessary for photosynthesis. Then got me thinking about what if you talk to your plants as play music with your plant, creates a bond with you and good for both your health. I liked this idea where your guitar sound would be translated into music for plant. We then had a very fast-paced workshop in which we created scenarios linked to our future world. From this I had the idea of creating a new routine that meant people would listen and interact with plants, which I thought would be a way to show them as equals. From this I created a quick concept prototype which visualizes data collected from you and your plants. This item was meant to live in your wall and be viewed kind of like a hive meter. When presenting this, the feedback I got was this is something that's already possible now and not future focused enough. After the weekend I had a bit of a rethink and decided that I wanted to base my project around agriculture in a new world and look at some of the inequities that people from agriculture and rural backgrounds have. At first I was looking at rural loneliness. I came across some articles and papers online highlighting this issue, which kind of contrasted with rural communities being more close-knit in the first half of our project. I then found a statistic which was that over 60% of farmers are over the age of 55 years old. This comes into my outcome, but at this point I was looking at rural loneliness and how some of my initial thoughts were how to create a form of communication with their plants, animals, etc. For this I immediately went to clothing, which is very practical, and I was looking at what farmers stereotypically wear. From this I found that most of it is very functional over form. I was then thinking about a toolkit that would allow the farmer to listen, play and talk, so to battle loneliness. I then had a tutorial which led me to think about future roles of farming, how the role of farming is changing and in ways such as stewardship initiatives and how it would fit into our Council for Collective Health. Started off by looking at what incentive green farming was given by the UK government, and this I found that there were a lot. I had a look into our current roles in agriculture and thought how it might fit into the new council. Then I then mapped all these active parts of agriculture to be part of the Collective Health Centre. Then I thought about the changing role of farmer/agriculture worker would be from this. I came up with a short statement. The role of a farmer is changing from just growing and producing food to growing, maintaining and creating a future countryside that is sustainable. To do this, they will need the data from the Council for Collective Health so they can make the correct decision. I then changed the name from farmer to greenkeeper. Then I thought back to how farming was an aging workforce, and I thought that a young adults program to help people getting into farming might be good to create a new line of workers. From this, I had to create reforms in agriculture to add this to the program for collective health's agenda. When putting this together, I was talking to a couple of mates who are farmers to get some thoughts on what would make farming easier to get into. The main things in this document are the Fairer for Farmers initiative, which kind of solves some issues that are facing agriculture today, and then the Greenkeeper program. For the outline of this program, I was thinking it was delivered in 3 parts: basics of farming and benefit, changing role into greenkeeper, then tools to become a greenkeeper. For the tool, I was thinking about a device that tells you about the land that you're on. Back to the program, I was thinking about the inequities in farming, which were equal access to skills and knowledge, nutrition equity, bridging generational and cultural divides. The main point in this is that farming is pretty hard to get into if you aren't born into it, and young people are finding it hard to create a job. Expert input session 2. From this, we had set up a future world. The feedback we got was positive in that we demonstrated that we came a long way from when we last met. And then this was then what I produced for the individual part. The key items were the greenkeeper role leaflet and the reforms in agriculture. Feedback I got here was maybe lowering the age would be good. I then created some personas to get a different feel for demographics, ranging from rural livers to city dwellers. This highlighted that there was a need for this in all Scottish schools. Looking at the program outline, I kept it similar to the previous generation. Then I looked at creating a tool which signifies you as a greenkeeper but also allows you to interact with the data collection system. This part stayed the same for the final greenkeeper role program. This is where my final outcome comes from. I was thinking of a way to allow players to make sustainable agricultural decisions on plots of land where you can see the impact. At this point, it was very basic, but the foundations of my concept prototype. How do we talk about what the work that I've done so far and decided to plant myself in the Council for Collective Health again? For this, I picked out some roles in the new agriculture department to create learning outcomes for lessons as part of the Greenkeeper role. These learning outcomes are the base for the final Greenkeeper program. How would this class be taken? At this point, I was thinking that maybe making it a class, taking its skill to be a pathway for further education and employment. At this point, I updated the reforms booklet and created a what you need to know guide, which although has a lot of info inside, isn't really for children. Looking at creating tools for learning based on the cross-species communication and data analysing learning outcomes, which I was thinking about using the Greenkeeper tool and creating an exercise around it, and then reciprocal moderating and data systems inspector as a digital game which at the end of the course would wrap up all learned. For the first class, I was developing how the item is used, then how the data is translated by creating a hub. This then shows what would be seen, and then they would fill out the worksheet. For the game, I wanted it to combine communication aspects, creating decisions that make a difference. When you make a decision, it actually changes your land, which is shown on this. I had a look at different types of interactive co-op games here, then was looking at what each map would look like. I like this one that allows for it to be projected easily and that it's easy to identify areas. I was then looking at different types of maps and how they would look like in a mock-up. For my testing, I found that this game layout was pretty large and found it quite hard to find space in testing. I had to compress the layout. In school, space would be a premium, and this game wouldn't be feasible. Possible solution is a video game that can be played at a station. For my formative review, I was told to develop the game as my final solution. How do I engage youth through visual language? What motivates them to engage and interact with the game? And then developing something physical. Then had to look at some inspiration for the style of game here, and then also the inspiration for a physical object. And this I was playing around with some sort of arcades kind of type, but then I was looking at some case study inspiration that I'd done last year and that I enjoyed, which was very inspired by the Everything Cart by Billy Angel, and also the Street Gaming Studies. I then created this mock-up where it would allow players to play the game but also allow for storage. I then had to look at inspiration for character design shown here, and also interaction for intervention cards. For these intervention cards, I was thinking about using agroforestry, natural fertilizer, crop rotation, and rewilding. These cards would be allowed in game to create like a quick boost. Then moving back to some of the personas, thinking about an S1 to S3 learner. I think that it's important that rural pupils engage as well, and also people from cities. Then looking at the teacher/facilitator, thinking maybe it works like DOV teachers at school. Maybe a couple of teachers per school would be leaders of this greenkeeper role program. Then created this timeline which shows people getting into the greenkeeper role, continuing their learning, and then going into national fives, hires, college, university, and then into employment. Then created this storyboard which illustrates the learner's first encounter with this program from a perspective of them. Then looking at my key learning moment. And then created 3 player characters here. Scientist helper, which would help you throughout the game. Some animals that would be in your world, and then some crops and items. I then looked at some inspiration for these graphics and characters. Games inspired by Minecraft, Terranil, The Sims, Stardew Valley, Animal Crossing. Then was looking at inspiration for a game controller, then made this sort of design here. Then was creating a sort of quick start guide here. It's pretty basic and kind of just outlines what I'm doing. I then created this draft presentation poster. I'm not very happy with the main picture here and the format of the writing, but that's something I can change. From the feedback, I was tasked to make like an upgraded world map example shown here, which shows in more detail. Then to also think about what make the game difficult, so adding money, weather, different challenges, different landscapes as well. This is then my final poster. I then looked at how the greenkeeper role colours for each task might be, so pink for the greenkeeper role game, etc. Then looking at the visual identity for the game, thinking it might be a lot different to the government. Was then thinking about how a tournament might work, looking at examples on design technology tournaments that I've done before and maths challenges as well to show this might work as well. Then created a national tournament which was for every school to compete in. Was then looking at some merch ideas here. At the end I was looking at the greenkeeper program pathway and how to visualize this in the government sort of way. This is what I came up with here. In reflection on the project, I found it was quite hard at points. I felt quite stuck, but I feel as if the work that I'd done shows that my process was not linear and it sort of branched out at each point. I think for stuff that I would do differently for the whip show, I would definitely redo the poster. The writing isn't very good, but yeah, apart from that, I'm pretty happy with everything that I've done. Although main points that I would say is timekeeping was definitely an issue for me. I felt as if I was taking too long on some tasks and not delegating important tasks to the top. But thank you for listening to my sketchbook video.